10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Warning: the material discussed in this show may be sensitive or a trigger for some listeners. Strong language and topics are discussed. We talk with active duty service members and practice OPSEC at all times. You have been warned.
The Bipolar DM, Jason Cottam. His show talks about Dungeons and Dragons, indie writing, and living with a mental illness, in particular bipolar disorder, borderline disorder, and major depression, among other diagnoses. Check us out right here on Saturdays, 7 p.m. Eastern, also on WLFE-DB.com, and wherever else you listen to podcasts. So take a seat, sit back, and get ready for the Bipolar DM.
Welcome to the Bipolar DM Show. I am your host, Jason, the Bipolar DM. This is a show about Dungeons and Dragons, indie writing, and living with a mental illness, in particular bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, and major depression, among other diagnoses. If you want to get a hold of us, have a question, comment, topic suggestion, you can reach us by email at thebipolardm@gmail.com. You can also visit our webpage, www.thebipolardm.com, for more information, as well as the links to our live shows, resources, and my blog, and also my podcast as well. You can watch us live Saturdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on twitch.tv/thebipolardm. You can find us also on Facebook Live and YouTube, is where we also broadcast from. We're a supporter of Safe Space. If you're not familiar with what Safe Space is, we're a virtual place for you to go to if you're in crisis or having problems going on in your life. Now, we're not doctors, we're not psychiatrists, we don't give advice, we're just here to listen, and we are not here to judge. If you are needing some help, more resources to get you through, go to WLFE-DB.com and click on the Safe Space button, and there it'll get you hooked up with a lot of resources. Or you can contact us, any one of us in the radio station, if you need to talk to somebody. Patreon. We have a Patreon account, so if you like what we're doing with the show, like to support us, our Patreon is patreon.com/bipolardm. We got several levels of support, going from goodies like buttons and stickers up to t-shirts and hoodies. Depending on how much you give each month, the money goes back into the show and supports other endeavors that we're doing, such as Dungeons and Dog Tags, which is our mission to bring Dungeons and Dragons to our veterans in active duty. Also, Bipolar Dragons, our show where a bunch of us geeks play Dungeons and Dragons on the live stream. That's on Sundays at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. And I want to thank also our number one Patreon, which is Siobhan. She has been a supporter of us, and we greatly appreciate her support. So thank you so much, Siobhan, for helping us out with your monthly giving. On today's show, we're going to be talking, because this is National Novel Writing Month, we're going to continue on our topics of writing, and we're going to talk about writing, editing, and publishing. Kind of give you a thumbnail's look at the process of going from writing your book down, the first thoughts, to when it's time to publish it, and going to either a traditional publishing house or doing self-publishing like I had done. When we do writing, first thing that helps when you're starting out, and that's usually the most difficult part, is knowing where to begin. And there's a couple different techniques, such as mapping or doing a brain dump. Mapping is where you write a topic down or a piece of information draw a circle around it, and then from there you draw lines to other circles which are related to that topic, and then it's just mapping out, all your ideas and thoughts. Now, when we talk about like a brain dump, this is where, you just write down every single idea that you got for your story, every scene that you think that would be really cool to have, thoughts about, what your character might do, and this is put down in no order whatsoever. This is just as the thoughts are coming to you, you write them down, not thinking about, well, this one should come here before this one, or this should come after that. It's just, you just totally, just mentally put down everything that's going on. And from there, either, however you put your ideas down on paper, you will then go from there to outlining. Now, outlining can look like a couple different ways. They can look like, in traditional school, how we're taught outlining with Roman numeral 1, big letter A, number little, 1, little a, all that stuff going on down, or any other method that you like to use for outlining. Now, that's where you're going to go ahead and you're going to take everything that you've written down and then actually put it in an order that's going to show up, that you're going to have, as your story. Now, there's several types of writers, and you have the outliner who outlines their story and plans it out. You also have the opposite of that, which we call the pantster, flying by the seat of your pants. And that's just the person who sits down at the typewriter or at the keyboard, and as they write, they just write the story out, and they have it all in their head. I typically write like that. I do try to also do outlining as well. The book I'm working on right now for National Novel Writing Month, I have outlined, just so I can kind of make sure I stay on track and keep my ideas down, especially because I'm doing daily word counts to hit 50,000 words by the end of the month. Unfortunately, with some things going on in my life right now, I am way behind on my word count. So, but outlining really does help you out a lot. It serves as a roadmap for your story, especially if you get lost or bogged down in a scene. You can move on to the next one, and in editing, come back and touch that. After you outline your story, you go into your character creation. Now, it does seem kind of odd, to outline the story and before you do your character creation, but it helps out a lot in knowing what your story's about when you outline it. And from there, you can actually work with your characters a lot more. What I do is I kind of list my characters out of who are going to be in the story, along with my mapping or mental dump. So I have an idea who's in the story and include them at the outline. And then after I do my outline, really work on character development. And this is where you want to flesh out your character and make them more real. And so with your character development, you have your basic things you want to do, such as their name, gender, race, description, just like the basic physical characteristics of your character. And then you want to get into some of the more mental aspects of your character as well. So you describe their physically, what they look like, how they dress, how they talk, mannerisms, stuff like that. There's some great resources on the internet for working, helping you develop your character, such as questionnaires and stuff like that, and fillable forms that has all the information on there. And after you get the basics down of the physical description, you start going into more of the mental stuff, such as events in their life that help shape them, whether they're good events, a positive thing, or a bad event, negative thing that has happened in their life. And so you work on your character, building them up from that skeleton that you've established, and start fleshing them out. And there you have several different types of characters as well. You have your antagonist, your protagonist, which is your hero of the story. Your antagonist, which is whoever it is that opposes your main character, your protagonist. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're a villain, but what it is, they stand in the way. And the antagonist can be several different things. It could be an individual person. It could be a system or society. It can be nature of some kind, whether it's a storm, or some kind of climatic event going on. So it really, anything that's standing in your way can be, your character's way can be the antagonist. And then we kind of put villains separately with that because, they need to be just as developed as your protagonist. You also have your secondary and supporting characters as well that help move the story along. The one way to define, your major characters, your minor characters, is their role in the story, where your minor characters don't do very much to move the story along. They won't have very much that's needed to develop them. Some of them can be as simple as a name, brief description, and what their role is in the story. Your other more major characters can be just as detailed and fleshed out as your protagonist. And so developing those characters is really important, because stories are about character. They're not just about events, but they are about character and character development. You want to list also, when you describe your character, what they are like now and what they're going to be like at the end of the story, how they're going to develop. And so you have all these things that you work on to develop your character. And then another thing that you can do also is you can put down their wants, their needs, and their flaws. Things like wants is things that they want out of life. Whether it is to slay the dragon at the end of the story, to be the king of this kingdom, to survive a storm. That's what their wants are. Now, the needs is something separately. That's something that they need to have in their life during the story for them to move on or develop, and that may not necessarily be something that the character really wants to happen to them. It could be something traumatic, or something that's takes away from them, loss of somebody very important to them through, some kind of death that's unnatural, or getting a magical item that kind of starts them out on their journey, or encountering a certain person, such as when Luke Skywalker in Star Wars encounters Obi-Wan Kenobi, which kind of starts off his journey as a Jedi. You have that person in there that's a great influence on their life that helps, again, move the story along, and helps start your inciting incident. Now, I did talk about the story arc and inciting incidents and stuff like that in one of my previous episodes, not last week, but the week before, when we were talking about National Novel Writing Month. But you have your wants, your needs, your flaws. Your flaws are the things that, will really make your character stand out and be more realistic. To show that they're not perfect, that they're human beings in their own sense, and that they mess up, they make mistakes, and those flaws could be anger issues, or it could be substance abuse, or they're not don't believe in themselves, like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. She learns at the end of the story that she had the power the entire time to return home to Kansas. But she really did not have the confidence to really believe in herself, because, if she had been told by the good witch, Glinda, at the beginning of the story, that she could have just clicked through 3 times and go home, she might not have believed her. She might not believe that was possible. But through the journey of her story in Oz, she develops and becomes a much more, developed character, one more confident and stuff like that. And so you want to have those things in there about your character change, how your character changes through the story. Now, I mentioned before character sheets. These are really valuable to have, because you want to keep notes on your characters. Usually what a writer they'll call it their Bible, or story Bible. and that has all the information in it about the story. It has sheets on for each character, about the plot, about the outline, stuff like that. And the character sheets will have, like I described before, the basics about them, the physical characteristics and mannerisms, their personality, their backgrounds, and all those other things in there. And that's all on a couple of sheets of paper, depending on how detailed you want to get into it. And it's like I said, you can find those on the internet. You can find those in books on how to write. I have several books on writing that have a very detailed character sheets listed in them, and extremely valuable tool to have. Now, I mentioned a little bit about the villain, and every story needs a really good villain, somebody that's well developed, well thought out, somebody who's well rounded, who has plans, who has wants and needs and flaws. That their mission to whether it's to recover the stolen plans for the Death Star with Darth Vader, or for Gollum Gollum's not necessarily a villain, but Gollum had the need to recover the lost magical ring from Frodo, or Sauron, would be the villain in the story of Lord of the Rings, and his wants to be able to physically return to the world and needing the ring of power in order to do it. But you want to put just as much work into your villain as you do your protagonist. What is their ultimate goal? How are they going about doing it? What are their contingency plans when it gets messed up by the protagonists? Because they're not going to give up. If somebody's on a kick for world domination, they're not going to let one antagonist, some wannabe hero, mess it all up. And so even if their plans are thwarted, they're going to have secondary plans and third plans, and backup, how they're going to do that. And so, so with your villains, you want to put in there what their plans are, what their contingencies are, what their ultimate goal is. And another thing that you can do, or, probably would be a great idea to do, and this is something that I've read about, I haven't really done myself, but... well, yeah, I have done, but not quite like this, is writing the ending first. It's a really neat technique to help you stay focused on writing your story, which is knowing how the book is going to end. How does a story end? What is the ultimate battle at the very end? What is it that ties it all up? And having it written down really will help you stay focused on the journey and the direction that you're going. Now, of course, as the story develops and things change and ideas come in, you're going to adjust fire on your ending, and it may end up being a completely different ending. Who knows? You may halfway through come up with a even more brilliant idea of how you want to end the story. Whatever it is, you want to have it written down. I usually kind of just make some quick notes and have it in my head, how this is going to happen, if not exactly how it is, So, like in the case in point with the story I'm writing, the main character needs to slay a dragon. And of course, so the end of the story, the final part of it, is that character actually slaying the dragon, and I just put a couple notes on it without, going through the entire battle and everything like that. So writing the ending first really helps out a lot in keeping your story and letting you know where the story is going. Now, sticking to your outline, an outline, like I said, is a roadmap. It is not something that you're locked into. It's a good idea, of course, to stick to your outline, but as like I said with the ending, if you are writing and developing along your story, things change, and so you want to make those adjustments to your outline. And the outline, again, will keep you on track. Now, of course, if you're a pantster and you don't do outlines, it's very easy to get down on rabbit holes, get on contingency, focus on things that are not important. So it can really bog you down if you are not using an outline to keep track of everything. And and then when you finish the story, after going through and getting all the way to the end, one thing I like to do is let my story sit and rest for like a month or so, so that when I come back to it in editing, I have kind of more fresh eyes, because when you're writing and you're right in the middle of it, it really is can be difficult to separate yourself from your story when it comes to editing. You would think that the hardest part of writing is writing the story itself, but actually that's probably one of the easiest parts of writing. That's difficult is when you get into editing and publishing and marketing and everything else. That's where the real work comes in, is all that taking what you've put down on paper and crafting it into a good fluid polished story. And so letting it rest a bit helps you, give you a little distance to your story. So like I said, I usually give it a month, sometimes a little bit longer, before I go back to it in editing. And after you let it rest, you have your first round of editing. And I usually do about 3 to 4 rounds of editing. And your first round of editing typically is used to plug up your plot holes, inconsistencies in your story, possibly fleshing some parts out a little bit more, cutting some stuff out, so you're just doing, you're not worried about the grammar or syntax or anything like that. You're focused more on the story itself in your first round of editing and making those adjustments so that the story flows a lot better. And so that's your first round of editing. So you do that round of editing, and then you have your second round of editing. Now that one there, that's where you're going to go through and you're going to make your corrections. Spelling errors, grammar, syntax. Those little things that are really important in the story, because there's nothing more distracting in reading a book or story than spotting spelling or grammatical errors. It's embarrassing. It ruins a story very easily. And so when you go through your second round of editing, be very mindful. And now there's some great programs out there like Grammarly, Microsoft Word has a really good spell check, stuff like that. But don't depend on spell check to do your work for you. You need to go through on your own and review every word that you've written, whether it's 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 more words. It's a lot of work. That's why I said the easiest part's writing it. Because when you go into editing, you're going back over all those words, and so you want to make sure you got it down solid. And then your third round of editing, that's when you're going to polish it up. So you got your syntax, you got your plot holes plugged up, you got your character development going, you got your spelling taken care of, your grammar taken care of. And then this is where you're going to go through once again and just tweak things and polish it up so it looks like a really good finished piece of work. Now, some people do more than editing than that. Sometimes, they'll do 2 or 3 rounds just to do spelling and grammar, or 2 or 3 rounds just to plug plot holes and stuff like that. You do you, whatever works, on editing, but you gotta edit. You cannot get away from editing. As much as many people hate it, it's a lot of work, but it's very important for your story to edit, because if you try editing as you go, typing, all it's going to do is it's going to slow you down, and you're going to get stuck in writing because you're more worried about your word choice and grammar and everything like that, and your spelling, than you are actually putting the story out. And so leave the grammar and everything like that for the editing process. But when you write, you get out those word count numbers and everything like that. And so, do your 3 rounds of editing. The next thing I would suggest, and this is not necessary, but it's highly recommended if you're planning on publishing your work, and that is to going to a professional editor. Now, a professional editor is going to go through, and there's a couple of different ways that they charge. They got a line by line where they go through each line, spelling, grammar, all that stuff, and then they have another one which the name escapes me right now what we call it, but that's more like the thought by thought, and that's where they're going to go through, and they are going to go through and look for plot holes, and they're going to look for character development and suggestions and stuff like that on how to adjust your writing. So both those types of edits are very important, but they can get very expensive, especially when you're looking at 35 cents a word. Out of a 50,000 word novel, that's a lot of money. That's a couple $100 to edit your work professionally, but it will pay off dividends if you do it, especially if you're paying for it yourself and plan to publish. The editing is important because, like I said, nothing stops a story cold worse than a spelling error or gross grammar errors. It breaks the spell of the story and it slows things down. It's just as if you put a speed bump on a NASCAR circuit. It's gonna jolt a lot of people when they see that, and it's very amateurish too, because if you're a writer, you want to be professional and you want to act like a professional, and you don't want to be an amateur at it. So that's why editing is so important, and the professional editing even more so, because they're the ones that are going to catch all the mistakes that got by you, because no matter how many times you edit, you're going to miss stuff. I can't tell you how many errors I found in my own published works where I've edited, was certain I had everything down right, and then still found mistakes in my books. So, editing is extremely important, especially the professional editing, and doing that, because it's going to pay off in your work and the overall structure of your book. We're going to go ahead and take a quick commercial break, and then when we're going to come back, we're going to look at publishing and the different ways of books are published. Welcome back to the Bipolar DM Show. I am your host, Jason, and if you're just tuning in, we have been talking about writing, editing, and publishing a novel. Just kind of giving a thumbnail view of the process of going from first putting your ideas down on paper to a finished product. Now, we had talked about the process of actually writing the story and the importance of editing and why you want to edit your book and also have a professional edit. Now, after you have your work done, after it's been published, after it's been polished up and is ready to go, this is where you're going to have to decide which route you want to take as far as publishing. Now, there's two basic routes to go. You have traditional publishing, which is through a publishing house, and that's where that'd be all the big ones out there that put the books out, and they distribute them and everything like that. And they're the ones also that would be paying you. Sometimes they'll do an advance, or royalties, however that goes. And so you have that, and then you have the independent publishing, which is self-publishing, and that's where you do it yourself. And okay, anyways, you got your traditional publishing, and you got your self-publishing or indie publishing, and indie publishing is a bit different in that while the publishing house absorbs the cost of editing and marketing and developing and designing a cover and everything like that, all the work is on you. And so you are responsible for not only having the book edited, but also designing a cover for it and to market the book and distribute it and pay for the printing cost of the book itself. While the traditional publishing house, they pay for all that. Now, the difference between the two really is a matter of not just the cost, but also how much you get paid back, as far as earnings go. With a traditional publishing house, your earnings can be less than independent. As far as royalties go, how much per book you earn. Because, again, they're absorbing the cost of putting your book out there. They're absorbing the cost of having it professionally edited and marketed and everything like that. So your royalties can be much, much higher for indie publishing. But on the flip side, you're going to have to work the connections as far as getting it into Amazon, getting it to Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, or any other big bookstore out there. And so that's where your traditional publisher would do that. And so if you're going to go the route of the traditional publishing house, one of the book that you will need is the Writer's Market, and it comes out every year. So right now it'll be Writer's Market 2022. They have a year ahead. I don't know why they do that. But Writer's Market is a huge book, and all it is just listings of every publishing house out there, including their requirements for submission, and sometimes they'll even have the cost as far as what they pay you and stuff like that. But the Writer's Market is a necessary tool book to get. If you're going to go the traditional publishing route, because that's just where it's all listed. You can probably find the information on the internet, but it's all in the book, and the book is rather expensive. Every year when it comes out, it can cost, I think, I could be wrong, but it could be like close to $60 for the book. It's not cheap to have one of these, but you have that resource, and with that, you're able to contact the publishing houses and everything. So that's a really good one to have. If you're going to go the self-publishing routes, there's a couple different publishers you can go through that actually are printers that go through. One that I do is called lulu.com. I've been with them for years and years and years, and I've written 2 books through them. They also do ebook and e-publication, and what's cool about them is that if you're going to do an ebook, it's free. they don't charge you for the ebook. And it's print on demand, so you print one book at a time as you sell it, versus some traditional publishing printing houses where you have to buy in bulk, several hundred to several thousand copies, and then have them sit in a warehouse or storage as you try and distribute the book yourself. So Lulu's pretty cool. They have really good royalties on there per book. And so as a book is sold, they print it right out. And I got, my 2 books right here. So, the first one I wrote was the 12-Step Prayer Rosary, a guide for the addict, and then also have the On My Honor, Living by the Scout Code. They're great little books. Perfect bound is what this is called. Nice and tight. Very good. When I did have this one for published, I had a couple of them where the glue came undone. It wasn't too great. But when I contacted Lulu, they sent me brand new ones, replaced it at no cost to me, which was great. Hadn't had any problems since then, and when you buy the books, you buy them at cost. So which is really cool if you're selling books on your own. Usually it's around $4 or $5 a book, depending on how many pages it is. It could cost more. And there are all kinds of options too. You got your hardcover, softcover, hardcover, softcover sizes. You see here we got the 2 basic, 2 different sizes of the book that's there. And but you buy the books yourself. You can buy the books yourself, or you can set up an online store through them. And then when the book is sold, it just goes straight to them, and then they do the handle the order. They have a really nice market there. They also help you distribute your work as well. You can get an ISBN number, or use theirs for free, which is the barcode on the back, which is part of the barcode on the back. That's this long number, which identifies the book, as one of a kind, or this particular edition. So with an ISBN and some printing, you can get distributed through Amazon, Books A Million, Barnes and Noble, stuff like that, and make those connections and those sales. Self-publishing is great in that it helps you really take control of your work, and because when you go to a traditional publishing house, they can really fuck up your book, totally change things around, because again, they're the ones putting the money out for it, and if they also accept your book and offer you an advance, ahead of your royalties, but an advance on your book, it gives them a lot of power control over your work as well. And so, so if you want to have more control over your work, I would highly suggest going with going indie writing versus a traditional publishing house. Another thing that's very common in self-publishing, or in publishing in general as a writer, is agents. I could do a whole show just on agents alone. Agents are the middleman for getting your work out there. They're the ones that have the connections. They know who to contact, who to submit work to. They're the ones that are trying to sell the book for you. And a lot of times how agents are paid is they'll take a cut in your sales, or you can pay them up front, however you want to go about it. But agents are great if you're going through traditional publishing, because a lot of publishing houses don't accept unsolicited work, which means that they didn't ask for it. And so having an agent can help you out greatly in that. Query letters are also very important, and a query letter is a letter that you send to a publisher. You don't send your work, but you send a query letter to a publisher, which would list who you are, describe your book, give an excerpt, sometimes sample chapter, And but it's basically one page, just a really quick synopsis of your book, so that the publisher can look at it and see whether or not they want to continue on and ask for a sample chapters, or to read the sample chapters that you've included in it. Or if it, because not every publishing house kind of has their niche in writing. It's in what they want to publish. So you don't want to send a romance novel to a publisher that does sci-fi. You don't want to send a sci-fi novel to somebody who does only historical fiction or nonfiction. So that's part of also knowing your market and having the writer's market, is knowing what kind of books they publish. Your agent would know that as well, or should, if they're worth anything. And so so going through an agent is very important. And also deciding on your format of your book, whether you want to go with a print book or an ebook. And really you don't have to do one or the other. You could do both. But you need to format the book, though, after you do your editing and stuff like that. If you're going the self-publishing route, you got to do the formatting. And what formatting is that's where the nitty-gritty margins and headers and footers and spacing and everything like that, font size, so the book is ready to be published, and printed out. And so formatting is another step in the writing process. It comes after editing. It comes after, but it comes before printing. And so you want to do a format of your book. Ebooks are formatted differently than published print books, and it's so that they show up on a reader as page by page and not all jumbled up and everything like that. So it's very important to know what the format is for the books. Like with Lulu.com was great, is that they got formats online in Microsoft Word and others, and so that you don't have to do all those adjustments. The font's already set the way it needs to be. The margins are already done. The spacing and everything is already set up. So with your formatting, it's very important to do that, because if you don't format your book right, it is going to look like junk, and it's not going to do any good. Another thing that you're going to have to do, especially if you're self-publishing, is designing a cover or paying somebody to do it. There's some great programs out there, like Adobe, Canva, stuff like that you can design and make your own book covers through. And again, you also want to format it correctly and have it the right size, so that when it shows up on an ebook or on a published printed book, it lines up, nice and neat, like how this one goes around, and then it has, right around the corner there. And if you're going with like an old traditional book, if you're going to have a book that's larger, and have to have the title on the side, you want to have it line up so that all the size sits right there like it's supposed to, versus, wrapping around the corner and stuff like that. Sorry about that. I didn't realize I was off screen. After you got your cover design, you got your book ready and ready to print, ready to go to format, to ebook, then you're going to get into marketing. And marketing is selling your book, and that's where the big separation between indie writing and a traditional publishing house really shows itself, because a traditional publishing house has those connections. They have the outlets that they're going to send books off to. But versus you yourself having to do it, making those connections, and it's not impossible to do. Amazon's very easy to submit. Lulu makes it available to, if you want to submit your work to, like Barnes and Noble and Books A Million and other big name bookstores, whether online or in print. In a traditional bookstore, you can get your information off the internet, or go through like Lulu, and they can do it for you, submitting those works. And the costs, again, with self-publishing versus print on demand, printing books, through a traditional publishing house, publishing house, usually they'll take care of all that, and then they'll either gift you or sell you at cost copies of your book, that you need for you to distribute, at book signings and stuff like that. So you need to, and also need to decide how many books you want to buy if you're doing, print on demand or indie printing, so that you can have them. I bought just a couple dozen for my particular books that I had that I distributed it out. With these right here, I bought a bunch of them and then I almost gave all of them away or sold them. And so, you want to have some bulk buying of the books too, especially if you're going to sell them. So, we talked about printing and publishing and all that stuff. Why do we write? And that's the big thing. When after all this stuff I just described, why do it in the first place? If all this work goes into it, why do you want to write a book in the first place? And a lot of times it's really hard to describe why an author wants to write a book. So they kind of have a need to. They feel like they need to write. And that's what a writer is. They have that need to write and to tell a story. But there's a lot of benefits to writing. Writing, brings joy. It helps with self-expression and creativity and stuff like that. And so you do get a lot out of it yourself as you write a story and put it out there and tell a story and get back and have people read it and, and give you feedback on it. And so, you get a lot of joy out of writing. And writing is also very therapeutic as well. A lot of psychiatrists, psychologists use writing as a therapeutic tool, especially if you've encountered trauma. And you don't necessarily have to write about the traumatic event that if you're going to write for therapy. It could just be as simple as writing short stories or writing a novel and fiction or anything like that. But writing is very therapeutic. It helps a lot with your mental health, and even writing fiction. And writing can also be social. I mean, so yeah, you're by yourself a lot of times when you write solo, but there is a network and community of writers out there too. And connecting with them is a fantastic way to help stay motivated, to get feedback on your work, to find beta readers. That's something I forgot to talk about, which is very important writing, which is the beta reader. In between your editing, after you do a lot of your editing, is when you want to engage with beta readers. A beta reader is somebody who reads your story and gives you constructive feedback. And this is before it's published. And you can find beta readers like on Facebook and writing sites and stuff like that through writing groups. And then what you do is you send your work to them. They read through it, and they're not professionals. So that's the thing about a beta reader, is they're not a professional publisher or anything like that. They're just your test market is kind of what it is. And so their job is not to edit your book or to tell you where all your mistakes are, but they tell you what their impressions of the book is, what they liked about it, what they didn't like about it. It could be they think might be some improvements to your work, or something that you might do, So beta readers are extremely important, and I like to have, 4 or 5 of them reading a work. So I kind of get, the more beta readers you have, the better your feedback will be, and more well-rounded too. If you have 3 beta readers say, yeah, your plot gets really weak and thin towards the middle, then that's, versus 1 that says that, then that's something you really need to look at and go back and do your work on. Is taking their criticism, and you don't have to go with it, but it helps to have some direction. And so beta readers are extremely important to have, especially if you're doing indie writing, so that your audience will you have a good idea how well your book can be received by your audience. Okay. I started writing as a kid. Actually, I knew I wanted to be a writer when I was in the third grade. And what happened was I was in the third grade and I entered into a writing contest and I won. I actually won. And part of my reward for the writing contest and winning that was going to a youth writing conference that they held for all the schools in the district. And at the time, we were stationed at Whidbey Island in Washington State. My dad, being in the Navy. And so, me and kids from other classes and then from other schools, we all came to this writing conference and we had little classes on how to write and classes on, we got to meet a real writer, published author, stuff like that. It was a lot of fun. And I knew then that that was what I wanted to do, was I wanted to write books. But it wasn't until much later in my life, just a couple of years ago, that I actually published a book. I wrote a lot of stories over the years, but never really published anything. And that's where I found that need to write. That need to tell a story was in the third grade, and it never left me. And through junior high into high school, I wrote little short stories. Then when I got into Dungeons and Dragons, I wrote a lot more for adventures, writing adventures and creating campaigns and creating worlds. And Dungeons and Dragons and the creative process in there is a lot like that of writing. And if you're lost in your story and you don't know what to do, pick up a Dungeons and Dragons manual. They have things in their random tables, where you can roll the dice and a random event is on the table on the corresponding dice roll, and stuff like that. The Dungeon Master's Guide is great in telling you and helping you develop a world, a well-rounded world with and populated with people that act as they would if they were alive, with the interactions and stuff like that. And so it's so important to do your research and read and all that to help you become a better writer. And Dungeons and Dragons has helped me with that a lot, and especially with the amount of writing and creating I've had to do. Yeah, a lot of joy in writing. I get a lot out of it. And when I wrote, especially this book right here, I'm not an addict, but I have a lot of friends in Narcotics Anonymous. This book, I wrote it while I was manic, and I wrote it and published it and printed it within 30 days. I mean, that was just how quick I was able to knock it out. And it's not a lot of pages. It's only about 25 or so pages, but when I wrote the book and put it out, though, I gave a lot of these copies away to people that were struggling with drug and alcohol abuse, and it helped some people too, and it gave me a great sense of reward, knowing that my book helped touch some people's lives and helped them out in their struggle to overcome addiction. When I wrote this book right here, on my honor, I did this, in honor of my kids that I had in scouting. 3 of my kids did scouting, and I really loved the Boy Scouts of America, or Scouting now is what it's called, since they've changed their name. And this book, I wrote this one fairly quickly too, and it is... what it is, it's taking the Scout Code, which is the Scout Oath, Scout Law, Scout Motto, all those things that the Boy Scouts need to learn, and breaks them down and shows how they apply to your everyday life. And that's, what the book's about, living by the Scout Code. Well, I thank you so much for your time and for tuning in. I am, of course, grateful for all of you that have been with me and following me all this time. We're always working hard on coming up with good content and to get guests on the show. So I'll be working on it through this week to try and get some guests out for the next show next week. Not sure yet what I'm going to be talking about, but I'll come up with something. But I want to thank you so much. This show depends a lot on you. If it wasn't for you watching it, I mean, there'd be no point in me sitting here behind the camera and in front of the camera and producing it. You can watch us live on Saturdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can go to twitch.tv/the Bipolar DM. The Bipolar DM. No, /Bipolar DM. There's no D in it. So it's twitch.tv/Bipolar DM is the channel. YouTube, we don't have a specific YouTube channel yet. We're still gaining followers. So if you can, go to YouTube, do a search for the Bipolar DM Show. Like, share, follow. The more followers you get, I think at a certain number they give us our own channel and an email and web address to make it easier. Nowadays is how they do it. You can listen to us on your favorite podcast. We're on Spreaker, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, all the major ones there. We submit those to, so we try to get those up pretty quick after the show. If you want to be a guest on our show, I'd love to have you. Or if you have comments or topic suggestions, things that you would like me to research and talk about, reach out to me, thebipolardm@gmail.com. Go to my webpage as well, thebipolardm.com. And like I said before, there's links to my other live shows, not just this one right here, but my other shows that I'm doing. There's also resources on indie writing, Dungeons and Dragons, and mental health. I have a podcast on there that I do occasionally, irregularly, I like to say, and also have a blog as well. So go to thebipolardm.com to check that out. And, of course, we're on Facebook. Not the biggest fan of Facebook right now. They kind of piss me off. But if you go to Facebook, the handle is @BipolarDM. And there I put articles, videos, and other things up there. It's pretty easy to keep up to date on that versus the web page, just because I can do it from my phone. Stuff like, transfer articles over there and videos and links. So go to our Facebook page, @BipolarDM. Next week's show, we'll be putting that on, so we'll be back here again at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Saturday. And thank you again for tuning in to the Bipolar DM. I'm your host, Jason. Thank you much, and remember, take your meds.
Thank you for listening to the Bipolar DM. They love sharing thoughts and ideas. See you next week, 7 p.m. Saturdays on WLFE-DB.com, where our shows are your shows, and that makes for great talk radio. WLFE Digital Broadcast Network is on TV. You can watch all of our shows on WLFE-DB.com. Check out our channels: Paranormal View for all of your paranormal type shows, LGBTQ Friends for all of our LGBTQ shows, Variety Unlimited for all other shows. It runs 24/7 right on WLFE-DB.com. You'll even catch the lives, all in one place. Never miss an episode, past or future. WLFE-DB.com, where our shows are your shows.